You're 21, Kulia. You didn't grow up with money and you didn't grow up with connections. You grew up watching your family scrape at the edges of everything. Rent, food, school fees, medical bills that arrived like bad weather, predictable and devastating. Your father worked construction until his back gave out. Your mother cleaned houses in the nicer parts of the city and came home too tired to speak. You had 2 younger sisters who deserved better than what the neighborhood was offering them. You understood that early, earlier than most kids should. You learned to fly the way some people learn to fight, out of necessity and obsession, with no formal path and no one guiding you. You started at 16, hanging around a small private airstrip on the edge of the city, doing odd jobs for the mechanics in exchange for time near the planes. You watched everything. You asked questions until people got tired of answering them, and then you asked more. A retired pilot named Garza let you sit in the cockpit of a Cessna 172 for an hour one afternoon, just to explain the instruments. You came back the next day, and the day after that. By 18, you had logged enough informal hours to fly alone. Not legally, not officially, but real hours in real air with real consequences if you got it wrong. Nobody gave you a certificate. You gave yourself the skill. By 21, you could land on a grass strip in crosswind conditions that made experienced pilots nervous. You could read weather without instruments, navigate by terrain, coax a sick engine into giving you 20 more minutes when 20 minutes was the difference between walking home and not. You were good, and you knew it, and the right people noticed. The man who approached you didn't dress like danger. He dressed like a businessman, which in Culiacan sometimes means the same thing. He sat next to you at a food stall near the airstrip and asked if you flew. You said yes. He asked if you wanted to get paid like it. You didn't ask who he worked for. You already knew. Everyone in that city knows the shape of that conversation. You said yes, because your father's medical bills had just crossed a number your family would never climb out of on their own. You said yes, because your younger sister had been accepted to a university in Guadalajara and there was no money to send her. You said yes, because you were 21 and good at the one thing that could change everything. The opportunity was sitting right there on a plastic stool eating a taco. You made a choice. Clear eyes, no illusions. You knew what you were walking into, and you walked in anyway. The first run was Sinaloa to Sonora. Night flight, low altitude, a strip near Hermosillo that was just a cleared field with 2 trucks parked at the ends to mark the boundaries. You flew a Piper Seneca with no transponder and no flight plan, 400 kilos in the back. The kind of silence in your chest that isn't calm, but feels like it. Your hands were steady, your mind was focused. You landed clean, the crew unloaded in 8 minutes, and a man handed you an envelope without making eye contact. 40,000 pesos. You drove home before sunrise and sat in your car outside your parents' house for a long time before going in. You paid your father's first hospital bill the next morning. You told your mother you'd picked up contract work. She hugged you and called you her responsible one. You let her. You flew 9 more runs over the next 3 months, each one cleaner than the last. You learned the corridors. South through Durango where the mountains swallowed radar signals, north along the Sonoran coast where the desert was too flat and too wide to patrol effectively. You learned which strips were trusted and which ones changed hands without warning. You learned to read the silence on a radio channel and know whether it meant safety or something worse approaching. The cartel had other pilots, older men, trained men, men with actual licenses and actual hours in their logbooks. But you were the one they called when the conditions were difficult or the window was tight. You had something that couldn't be taught in a classroom, an instinct for the air that felt almost physical, like the plane and your nervous system were running the same software. 4 months in, you had paid off your father's medical debt. Your sister was in Guadalajara. Your mother had stopped taking the extra cleaning jobs. The math had changed, and you had changed it. You let yourself feel good about that. You let yourself believe the control was real. Flight 11 is where the ground shifts under everything. The job comes through your handler on a Tuesday, a pickup in Michoacan, delivery to a strip in Chihuahua, standard weight, familiar route. Nothing about the briefing raises a signal. You've flown this corridor before. You know the terrain. You fly south, land at the pickup strip, and the loading takes longer than usual, 15 minutes instead of 8. One of the ground crew keeps looking toward the tree line. You notice it, but say nothing. By the time the cargo door closes and you're back in the cockpit, you've already told yourself it's nothing. It isn't nothing. 40 minutes into the return flight, your radio crackles with a frequency you don't recognize. A voice, flat and professional, tells you to reduce altitude and hold your current heading. Not cartel, not military, something in between, the kind of voice that belongs to a world with no clear rules and no paperwork. You have 3 seconds to decide. You push the throttles forward instead. The plane climbs and banks hard left into a valley you know from memory, dropping to 200 feet and going dark. You fly the next hour by instinct in terrain, hugging ridgelines and river valleys, not breathing normally until the lights of the Chihuahuan Desert appear below you. You land. You deliver. You say nothing about the radio contact to the ground crew. But your handler already knows. Someone on the ground saw the altitude change on a tracking system you didn't know existed. He calls you an hour after landing. The voice is calm, the way deep water is calm, still on the surface, no way to know what's moving underneath. He says there are questions about that 40 minutes. He says the organization needs to understand what happened in that valley. You explain, he listens. Then he says the boss wants a meeting. You drive to a house in the hills outside the city. The man waiting inside is not what you expected. No theatrics, no weapons visible, no performance of power. He's 50, tired-looking, drinking coffee at a kitchen table like a man reviewing quarterly reports. He tells you the radio contact was a rival group that had been tracking the shipment for 2 weeks. He tells you that your decision to break protocol saved the cargo. He tells you this with the tone of a man who is simultaneously complimenting you and informing you that you now belong to him in a way you didn't before. He says you're the best pilot they have. He says that means the next job is yours by default. He says the next job is Colombia to Sonora, direct, over the Gulf, no stops, no support, no room for error. He slides a piece of paper across the table with a number on it, $500,000 American upon delivery. You look at the number, you think about your family, you think about your sister studying in Guadalajara and your father sleeping in his own bed in a house where the bills are paid. You think about everything that number could mean and everything saying no in this kitchen could mean. You say yes, because that's the only word left in the room. You spend 5 days preparing. Weather charts, fuel calculations, wind data across the entire Gulf of Mexico. You run the numbers until they're part of your breathing. The plane is a turboprop commander with long-range tanks. Maximum fuel, 7 hours of flight time. The route is 6 hours and 30 minutes in clean conditions. That leaves 30 minutes of reserve. A headwind above 20 knots and the math stops working. You need a calm night, light winds, and silence across 2,800 kilometers of controlled airspace. You prepare for the scenario where everything goes right, and you prepare for the moment it doesn't.
The night arrives. The coastal strip outside Cali is wet from afternoon rain. The commander sits heavy at the end of the runway, loaded to the edge of what the airframe was designed to carry. 1,500 kilos behind the cockpit, strapped floor to ceiling. You do a full walk-around in the dark with a flashlight, checking every surface yourself. Every panel, every seal, every tank cap. Not because you don't trust the crew, because this is your life, and at 300 feet over open ocean there is no crew, no backup, and no second chance. You climb in, run the checklist, start the engines. The sound fills the cockpit like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. You taxi to the end of the strip and sit there for a moment with your hands resting on the throttles and the darkness ahead of you absolute and total. You think about your father. You think about your mother coming home tired. You think about your sister opening textbooks in a city that gave her a future you helped buy. Then you push the throttles forward, and the plane surges into the dark, and the trees come up fast, and the weight pulls at you like something trying to keep you on the ground, and then you're through and climbing, and the coastline falls away below, and there is nothing ahead of you but the Gulf and the night. 300 feet, no lights below, no horizon. The altimeter tells you where you are, and you trust it absolutely, because your eyes are useless now. The water and the sky the same shade of nothing in every direction. This is flying reduced to its purest form. You and the instruments and the engine and the darkness, and no room anywhere for doubt. You check fuel every 15 minutes, 2 hours. 3. The engine steady, the wind manageable at 9 knots, the reserve holding. 4 hours. The fatigue starts to move in around the edges. You bite down on the inside of your cheek until the pain sharpens your focus. You cannot sleep at 300 feet over the Gulf of Mexico with 1,500 kilos and everything your family needs strapped into the plane behind you. 5 hours in, the reserve drops to 22 minutes. Wind has shifted to 14 knots on the nose. You climb to 450, hunting for cleaner air. You find it at 440 and the fuel burn steadies. 20 minutes of reserve, not comfortable, enough. 5 hours 40 minutes, a pale smear of light on the northwestern horizon, Mexico's Pacific coast, the most honest thing you've ever seen from a cockpit. You bank north and descend to 200 feet, hugging the coastline into Sonoran airspace. The desert opens below you, black and flat and enormous. The fuel gauge is touching the reserve line, 12 minutes of margin between landing and the engine going quiet over the Sonoran desert with 1,500 kilos and nowhere to go. You see the trucks before you see the lake bed, 3 of them arranged in a triangle, headlights on, waiting. You line up steep and fast because at this weight a slow approach is a stall, and a stall at 100 feet is a conversation that ends badly. The wheels hit hard, the plane bounces once on the packed sand, shudders, skids, and stops 40 meters from the lead truck. Men move to the cargo hold immediately, efficient and silent. 1,500 kilos unloaded in 11 minutes. A man walks to your window and passes an envelope through without a word. $500,000. A phone rings in your pocket, your handler telling you the debt is cleared. The boss sends his respect. The line goes dead. You sit in the cockpit with the engines off and the desert completely silent around you and the envelope in your lap. You flew 2,800 kilometers over open ocean in the dark, overloaded, underfueled, alone, and you made it. Your family is safe, the money is real. You should feel something enormous. Instead, you feel the specific emptiness of a man who has just understood something irreversible about his own life. Because you know what comes next. They'll call again, not because they want to, because they have to. You are now the pilot who did the impossible run, and that fact belongs to them more than it belongs to you. The next job will be harder, the next strip shorter, the next payload heavier, because you have proven that you can handle it. You didn't buy your freedom with this flight, you demonstrated your value. And in this organization, value is not rewarded with retirement, it's rewarded with more work. You fly an empty plane back to Mexico at sunrise, land at a strip you know, drive to your family's house. Your mother is in the kitchen, your father is asleep. Your sister's photograph is on the refrigerator, taken on her first day of university. She's smiling in it. You sit down at the kitchen table and your mother puts food in front of you without asking where you've been. She's learned not to ask. You eat, you drink coffee, you look at your family moving through their morning, safe and warm and unaware, and you understand that you would fly that route again tonight if they needed you to. That's the trap, not the money, not the threats, not even the organization. The trap is that it works. The people you love are okay because of what you do in the dark, and that truth sits in your chest like an anchor you chose to swallow. The phone will ring again. You already know you'll answer it. Not because you have to, because by now you're not sure there's a version of you that exists without it.